things that I didn't do was I wasn't global in my speech. It was basically geared for the United States. And I went with that merely because we were in Denver, and I knew probably 75% of the audience, and maybe even 75% of the judges, I'm not sure, would be familiar with the United States and would be familiar with what I was going to speak about. Whether this hurt me or helped me, I don't know. But it's a very important lesson to learn, that if you know your audience and you're able to cater to actually what they want to hear, not what you want to say, but what they want to hear, they're more receptive of whatever it is you're going to speak about. If you are at a Democratic convention, you're not going to talk about the Republican candidate, because that's not what the audience wants to hear. The more informed you are of your audience, the better your speech will be, and the more receptive your speech will be taken. The difference between my semifinal and my final, and this is what I encourage people to do whenever they're going to give a story, whenever they're going to give a speech, is to stay true to yourself. There was a speech I gave, and the speech was involving one of the presidential candidates, and a friend of mine told me, I don't think you should mention that in your speech. You might offend people. You might upset people. But I stayed true to myself, and I said what I wanted to say, because in the end, it is your speech. The speech I gave for finals was borderline, I think, on being able to be accepted without, what can I say? Without prejudice. So I stayed true to myself. I went out on a limb. I said what I wanted to say, and yet I still placed, which says something. I believe Mark Brown, when he was posed with the question, someone commented and said, Luisa broke all the rules, yet she still placed. And Mark Brown said, well, sometimes rules need to be broken. I believe he had said it wasn't until 1995 when one of the speakers at finals came from behind the podium and gave a speech. So imagine if that one speaker had not done that back in 1985, the speeches we would be watching at finals now would all still be done behind a podium. And to me, that would make almost for a generic, boring speech. So when it comes to giving a speech or telling a story, if there are parts of your speech that you're wondering, is this too much? Am I pushing the edge? Am I pushing the line? Practice on a few clubs, practice with a few friends, ask them what they think. But in the end, just stay true to what you wanted to get across in your speech. Any questions on that?
Would you, in an international speech contest, I don't know if you can walk off the stage, but you see people on TV that they, Jack Parr started it. He would walk into the audience and talk to them in the audience. And, you'd always get a laugh somehow out of that. Would you actually do that in a speech contest?
Actually, that's a good question, but I believe the rules state that you must stay within the staging area. And before the contest, one of the things they'll have to do is briefing the contestants. They will tell you, your stage area is from here to here, from here to here. And if you go outside any of that area, you are automatically disqualified. Now, the time to do that is when you're giving a speech at your club, when it's not going to hinder or affect the outcome of a contest. Just like going over time is a disqualification, going outside of the staged area is also a disqualification. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yes, you did very nicely.
Oh, okay, thank you. I also wanted to state that if you're going to use your story or speech to compete, along with going with the idea of being true to yourself, is do not limit yourself. Thank you so much, Phyllis. Appreciate it. And by saying do not limit yourself, it's on TV or movies, they're constantly coming up with new ideas and new ways of presenting the same idea, the same thing over and over. It's almost like trying to tap into the mind of a child, because a child's mind is so innocent. There are no barriers. If you're able to take a single idea and strip it of all the barriers that you know of, this is what's going to set your speech apart from everybody else's. My finals speech, I went and I did something that I actually had to consider if there was going to be backlash on it, because as a Hispanic person, I was making fun of the Hispanic people. And I tried to throw in every single thing that I knew that people talk about Hispanics. And I made fun of it and I made light of it. And anytime you can attack yourself, or you can put yourself up on the plate as a sacrifice, your audience is going to be okay with that. It's when you attack the audience or attack the audience views that the speech is not going to go the way you want. Unfortunately, being true to yourself does come with limitations, but knowing your limitations is good. As I said, I attacked my race, and I was waiting for backlash from people that knew me, people of my same heritage, and yet the way they said I presented it, everything was fine, so I was glad about that. Any questions on that?
Could you give us a short example how you did it?
How I did what? Is that Julie?
How you spoke about the Spanish.
Okay, okay. So in the final speech, and what might be shocking to some people is if you've seen the speech or heard the speech, I am the kind of person that does pull over and changes flat tires. I give hitchhikers rides. None of that frightens me or scares me, so I do it all the time. And the one day that I was driving through Austin, Texas, on my way home, there had been a car pulled over on the side of the road, and I noticed it had a flat tire. What I thought was a woman was actually a person standing behind the car, but the gentleman had hair down to his pants. So I automatically assumed it was a woman, and he was rummaging through the trunk of the car looking for a jack and a spare. when I pulled over to help what I thought was a female, it turned out to be a male. And he turned around and he frightened me. And what frightened me even more was when he closed the trunk of the car, 2 other Hispanics got out of the car. And I literally thought, me being Hispanic, they frightened me. I literally thought that was my last day on earth. So I portrayed myself as a racist against my own race only because I wanted my audience to think, oh my gosh, I've done that too. I've been a racist. And for me to do that, I had to show that I had been a racist. So when I attacked my culture or my heritage, the crucifix, because all Mexicans wear a cross for being Catholic, the accent, the instead of saying joke, we say yoke. We're not able to say the J, we say Y. So when I added the line, when the gentleman came up and said, my name is Jesus, I can tell you a yoke, I had to come back and make fun of him and said, okay, Jesus, what's your joke? And the audience was able to relate to that because the audience thinks these things, but would never say it out loud. So what I did was I allowed the audience to think, oh, okay, I'm not the only one that says stuff like that or thinks that. And we become so sensitive about what we say or how we say it that everybody is scared to say anything. So I went and threw it all out there. I said, look, this is what we do. This is how we dress. This is how we act. And so the title of the speech, First Impressions, on my final speech, was not just about the first impression. I wanted the audience to have a first impression of me going out there and howdy y'all with a cowboy hat. But then I went and changed the personality, and then I changed again. And then the person that was supposed to be afraid of me, I made him afraid of me instead of me afraid of him. So it was 8 different first impressions. If you're able to attack yourself during the speech, during the story, but at the same time leave a message to where your audience stops and thinks, I know what she's talking about. I've done the same thing. That's all I wanted my audience to do, is for them to realize they're just as guilty as I was. Did I answer the question, Julie?
Yes, of course. Yesterday I told my granddaughter about it and about perception and how we think about others.
Yes.
And I also used it in my stand-up comedy, telling she can barely walk. What the heck she is doing here? Or something like that.
Luisa, I think Rashmi wants to ask a question. Rashmi,
Sure.
go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, ma'am. Hello, everyone. Luisa, ma'am, I have a question with you. I
Yes.
understand all the aspects, like our story should have a global impact. It should connect with a global audience. But the problem I am facing in Toastmasters, that this is the first time through the Toastmasters I came in contact with the different races, different peoples, Chinese, Malay, Filipino. This is the first time I came out from India. I am staying in this multiracial community in Malaysia. So, ma'am,
Okay.
most of the my stories are related to my own community, my own background, my own traditions. And what happened, this naturally impact my stories and my way of talking. So last time I participated in international speech contest, I reached up to the division level. But ma'am, my story had a Indian background, Indian setup. So in the end, I heard that I didn't reach that level because it is limited only to that particular Indian audience. My problem always I face, ma'am, how to make the stories that has global impact, that can easily connect with each and every. How can I do that? How should I improve that point?
Well, that's an excellent question. And there's two different things to consider. When I practiced my speech, I practiced it in front of Hispanics, in front of Anglo white people. There were Black people, and then there was an Asian lady that heard my speech. And after I asked the audience, did everyone understand what I was speaking about? And the Asian lady raised her hand and she said, I don't understand why you were afraid of the man who you were going to help him change the tire with. And I said, well, it's because he was Hispanic and the way he was dressed and he had tattoos. She said, well, you didn't say that, so I didn't know that. So if you're able to give a speech in front of people other than your ethnicity and ask them, what do you understand? What do you not understand? Because what is common for you is not common for everyone else.
Right.
Now, if you want to speak on an international level, my suggestion would be to try and take an event that is common with everyone, not so much a religious event, because it's different. Your religion is different from most. You can take an event such as having a baby, because that is global. That is global. It doesn't matter where you come from. People have babies. You need to find a common thread that you have that you can speak about that will be all across the playing field with anybody that listens to your story, listens to your speech. They're going to understand exactly what you're talking about. So it's finding that common thread that you have with your culture and your heritage, something that you can bring to the table that will be worldwide.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your suggestions. Thank you.
I hope I answered the question.
Yes, ma'am. I understand. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Louisa, can I ask you a question of you? I'm just fascinated. I'm fascinated listening to you. How did you learn all these tips?
Have you ever seen someone who's really good at something and you think they must practice all the time, whether it's a magician or a stunt car driver? I don't practice as much as I should because I could be so much better, but I almost want to blame it on a natural talent. I feel for the person who is afraid of public speaking, because I am not afraid of public speaking. In fact, the more people you put in front of me, the better I'm going to do. If you put 3 people in front of me, I'm afraid. Because if I tell a joke and 3 people don't get it, 3 people aren't going to laugh. But if I tell a joke in front of 1,000 people, 400 of them are going to get it. So that's 400 people laughing. Another thing is, when I was in high school, I was in drama, I was in speech, I was in prose and poetry. So there was already a theatrical background that I liked, and I wanted to be better. So I watch the people that I admire and I watch what they do. If there's somebody you admire, and it's not so much copying as it is learning from them. Another thing that is so important that sometimes we feel we don't need is criticism, but constructive criticism. People will come up and say, wow, you were great. And that's good to hear, but it's not helping me grow. If somebody says, you know, you do this a lot, you shouldn't be doing that so much. That's what I need to know. That's what I need to hear. Because when somebody critiques me and it makes sense, they're telling me for a reason. I don't see it, and maybe other people that watch me or listen to me don't see it. When that one person comes up with that one bit of knowledge that you're lacking, don't take it as offensive, but realize they're telling you for a reason. Now, what you do with that decides on whether you become a better speaker or not. And I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, no, that was excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Just as the timer, I'll let you know that you're at 38 minutes.
Okay, I have actually gone over almost, well, in fact, everything that I had wanted to share. So I don't know if there's extra time. I believe somebody has mentioned that maybe there were going to be either other questions or table topics. I would love to see that, because this is the first time I've ever done anything on Zoom. So this has been such a learning experience for me, and I'm so grateful for that. Thank you.
I have a question, and this is to do with humor. I always tell, I mentor people who are giving speeches and want to get in and win that international speech contest. And they always say, if you can, work some humor in there. Dr. Martin Luther King's wife died, and I saw Bill Clinton standing there in front of 2,000 people that were in that church making jokes, and everybody was with him because he just did it so well. And it's difficult in front of a global audience. So how do you get the balance there?
I'm probably the least funniest person in my family. My brother and my father were hilarious. My mom is hilarious. So to put a balance on humor, you don't want humor to overshadow your message. However, humor for me is a gauge. It tells me if the audience is listening. Because if I put a joke out there and nobody laughs, that tells me the audience isn't listening. I think once you put out your first joke and the audience laughs, now you've got their attention. Now they want to laugh more, because we rather laugh than cry. So your balance in humor will be, not every line should be a punchline, but I would say every minute or 2 minutes, somewhere in between that, if it's a 5 to 7 minute speech, you want to put in a joke. You want to put in some form of humor. Now with my final speech, I started out casual, a little serious. Then I believe my entire middle section, to me, was humor. And when I was done making the audience laugh, I came back, I got serious, and then came back with one more punchline and walked off the stage. You don't want the humor to overshadow, but yet you want your humor to complement your speech. Write out your speech. What I wind up doing is I'll get my phone, and every time I have an idea, I'll go to voice memo and I'll record it, because I know I will forget it. So I'll record it, and then I'll go back and write all my ideas down, and I'll put them in some form of chronological order, or how it's going to make sense. And I'll pick something to make fun of. And every time you pick an idea or pick part of the speech to make fun of, that's when you want to interject a little bit of humor. And it's just enough to keep the audience interested, but it's enough not to overshadow the meaning or the reason for your speech. And I hope I answered the question.
Yes, great. I might say I was listening to your speech live through Zoom, by the way.
Oh. I would rather do humor than be serious. But I realized that to conquer my fear or to become a better speaker, I need to be able to do a serious speech with little humor, only because that's my weakness. I could get on stage and tell jokes all day, humor, and have people laughing, but that's what comes easy to me. And for me to grow, I need to do something that makes me uncomfortable, and a serious speech with little humor makes me uncomfortable. So when I do a serious speech, I throw in a little bit of humor, but I'm telling myself, you need to do this to be a better speaker.
Does anybody else have more questions?
So I've got one more question. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, Michelle.
Go ahead.
What resources would you recommend that we look at to further develop our storytelling skills?
What resources? Right now, we have the advantage of having the internet. If there is any speaker that intrigues you, if there's any body out there that you look up to or admire, again, it's not so much copying as it is seeing what they do and how they do it. You can almost go on YouTube and pick up any video, watch any person. I love watching John F. Kennedy in his speeches. He had a charisma, he had an attraction that to me was unprecedented. So to be able to go back and watch how his style was, his pauses, his seriousness, his eloquence, to me also with certain speeches, Barack Obama has almost the same eloquence. Martin Luther King. So if there's anybody that you admire, you like the way they sound, you can't get enough of listening to them, if you go and research them and watch their style, again, not so much to mimic or copy, but to be able to get an idea of what is going to click or what is going to have people want to listen to. And I hope I answered.
Luisa, I have a question. It's Elizabeth. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Did you have a coach to help you prepare for the World Championship of Public Speaking?
That's an excellent question. The question is, did I have a coach for the World Championship Public Speaking? I had calls from so many different people wanting to coach me, but being the strong-headed person that I am, I didn't want any help from anyone. I felt I had practiced my speeches enough and gotten feedback enough from the general public to be able to say, this is me. There are some people that can benefit from coaching, and when I think I need coaching, I will ask or I will look for a coach. But I felt I was strong enough in what I wanted to do and what I wanted to represent that I didn't need a coach And again, someone had also suggested that if I were to hire a coach and I were to place, that that person would be able to come back and say, well, if it wasn't for me, Luisa Montalvo probably would not have placed. I went out there and I did something that I hadn't done in 7 years, because it took me 7 years to finally win at district. I took district so seriously because I wanted to win so badly that I wasn't having fun. This was now a chore. It was a burden. It was a job. It was something that I almost didn't enjoy anymore. And I remember telling my friend Phyllis Allen, who chartered most of the clubs down here in South Texas, I told her, if I don't place at district this year, I'm done. So I went out my 7th year, which was last year. I had fun doing what I was doing. And I wound up on the world stage, which to me is still mind-boggling. Still mind-boggling. And for anybody who thinks that 30 is the golden age, or 40 or 50, I just turned 60 and my dreams are still coming true. You're never too old to achieve what you want to achieve. You're never too old to start being the best version of yourself. I'm having a fantastic time. In answer to the question, I was offered to be coached, but I declined everyone's offer.
Okay, so it looks like we've had quite some interesting exchange of questions and answers. We might have time for one final question. Does anybody have a question, a follow-up to one of the earlier questions, or a new question? Please, I am on gallery view, so I can see you. If you don't know how to unmute yourself, just raise your hand and I can see you. And okay, go ahead, Carol.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, Louisa. This is Carol. I'm in Australia. Hi. I'm in Australia, and we have a particular way of speaking. I'm sure you can hear my accent. And we like what we've heard. I like what I've heard so far today. So I've done a little summary, and I'm wondering if you could just see what I've missed out. So your storytelling tips were valuable. I get the stay true to yourself. I understand how important it is to balance humor and seriousness. I get it that we need to hook the audience in from the start, and I understand how important it is to know your audience. So these were the big standouts for me, and I wonder if there were more that you wanted to share, or was there something I missed from yours?
Those are basically the important tips. I will say one thing. I would say for the last 5 years, I've seriously worked on my diction. And the way I knew my diction would be understood or acceptable is I would take my phone, and it has a little microphone button. And when I would text someone, I would hit that microphone button and I would speak, and I would go back and look at the message. And I realized I was always saying gonna instead of going to. So it got to where my iPhone helped my diction. So I enunciate every word as clear as possible so that my iPhone recognizes what I'm saying. For people with accents, if you take your phone and practice this, if you say fur instead of for, it will say FIR instead of FOR. And that was one of the words I constantly misspoke. I would say, well, for, and it's not for, it's well, for all intensive purposes. Or, so the phone helped me a lot when it came to diction. You can have an accent, but if you use your phone to be able to dictate and go back and read exactly what your phone has said, you've said, and it's exactly what it should be, then you're good. But I just threw that in right now because when you said I'm from Australia and I have an accent, that reminded me of what I did to try to curve or try to improve my diction.
Thanks, Louisa. That's brilliant. It happens so often with our Australian speakers. Our enunciation is a little lazy, and often people from other dialects don't understand us. So we do need to enunciate, and we do have to make sure that our speech pattern is clear and audible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Thank you for that great question. And Louisa, I love how you were true to yourself and you shared your own vulnerability. And I typed on the chat because I am also, my mentor is Siri. And I understand when I am lazy and I'm slurring my words, then she comes back with really weird words. At this point, I believe, unless, what does our timer have to say? I believe we are we? Yes. And don't mind, Helen, it's not you. I'm obsessive with time, and people in the club know that. So we have, I mean, I know there's many more questions, and I'm sure that Luisa will be happy to respond through email later. But at this point, I believe it is time for us to thank her for her wonderful insights. Thank you so much. Let's all give her, and if you are muted, just do it this way. Let's give her a really big round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. And
thank you.
Please hang around if you can. I know it's a bit late for you in Texas, but then I also know that you have very, very strong stamina for staying up at 3 in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
So please hang around as we bring up our impromptu speaking segment. And I love